What's good, guys? It's IllSun4K, and thanks for tuning in for another episode of Happy Horror Days here on my channel, IllTV, where if it's pop culture, you know it pops up here. And for those of you watching and asking, what the hell is Happy Horror Days? If you don't know already, Happy Horror Days is a month-long celebration of horror movies that take place on or around Christmas that we do here on my channel for the second year in a row now. And this movie right here is actually an awesome horror film that I had to review holding off last year, because much like the other films on this list, as you've been watching, this one celebrates its anniversary, and this one celebrates a really big anniversary. 50th anniversary of the original Black Christmas. Yes, the original Black Christmas came out 50 years ago, and that's kind of crazy when you think about it, because this is a film that really, when people talk about it, they talk about it being one of the first, if not the first, true slasher. And it actually predates Halloween by 4 years as being the first holiday slasher as well, which is really crazy when you think about it, because Black Christmas is really not one that people bring up a lot. And I think that's because it just was so early and so ahead of its time, and still had that like melodramatic 70s acting that was like, I don't know, it just wasn't like the greatest thing in the world that at the time, but it really just emphasizes what it's about. And to be quite honest with you, its release date, December 20th, 1974, could arguably be the birth of the slasher itself. And that's why we really have to take a look at this movie and go a little bit more in depth than we usually do, and talk about numbers and what it did and how it made it happen. And I'm just really excited to look at this film because I want to do it last year, but again, I had to wait because I knew this was the year to do it. So again, guys, thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe, and make sure you stick around all month long for more Happy Horror Days, month-long celebration horror movies that take place on or around Christmas. Make sure you stick around all month long for that too. I'm running out of things to say. Let the intro start. So what part of what makes this movie so good is the plot is actually a really believable plot. You know, we catch this opening scene point of view affair of a guy breaking into a sorority house and, you know, starting to eventually do what he does best. That's called a sorority, and make horrible noises about moaning and how he's going to kill these girls, and talks about how he jerks off to them. It's really, really foul stuff that you would only do back in the 1970s, because that was the only way to terrorize people, was through the telephone, because there was no internet or email. Eventually, one of the girls goes upstairs talking about how uncomfortable she feels about everything, goes upstairs, and that turns out that's where the killer is hiding, and he asphyxiates her and kills her right away, which is actually a pretty intense kill for the 1970s with how things were going with that, as you'll hear me talk about later on in the review with the melodramatic acting. From here, it gets to a point where this guy keeps on calling nonstop and terrorizing the sorority girls, but along the way, of course, these sorority girls have their own lives, including one who has a boyfriend who's kind of upset that she doesn't want to have a kid. You have the sorority mom who's trying to take care of everything. You have the police who are constantly getting phone calls about this guy that they can't seem to do anything about, and it's just a nonstop bunch of smaller affairs going around the fact that there's this one main killer who keeps on slowly offing everybody in the house. And his ways of killing them, again, are pretty cool. Sometimes he strangles them, asphyxiates them, stabs them. We get a lot of point of view shots of the guy. His name is Billy, apparently, and we see him having mental meltdowns and freaking out, and how he spies on the girls, and how he proceeds to phone call them and do everything. It's cool to see from his point of view what he's doing and how he's really causing an absolute terror for these girls. Eventually, it gets to a point where the police start tracing the phone call and trying to figure out where the guy is, because it's becoming more and more apparent that this guy is becoming very dangerous as people are going missing and police aren't sure where to find them. In the end, of course, we see the mass slaughter of everybody lying around the house as the final girl tries to get away and get out of the house, as the police inform her that the call is coming from inside the house, in one of the coolest and most iconic scenes of a horror movie ever. This whole plot is really well done. Again, it's not very innovative, but it's very, very well executed, and I like it. It seems like something that's like a possibility. It's not too over the top, and it's definitely one to check out. This is a must-see slasher you have to see if you're remotely into slashers at all. Is the best way to start the review section. Like, this is really it. This is a horror movie that really set forth a lot of tropes that we still see to this day. I mean, this is the horror movie that really started that whole the call is coming from inside the house thing. I mean, that's insane to think this is where it started.
No, don't do that, Jess. Jess, the caller is in the house. The calls are coming from the house. Jess!
And what's fascinating is horror movies were nothing new at the time at all. I mean, the entire Universal Monsters cinematic universe existed. I can't believe I used that to describe Universal Monsters. That existed. Slasher already showed someone getting killed on screen in a shower, basically depicting the first ever stabbing scene. A lot of things were done already at this point, but this is really the first modern-esque slasher that set forth the tone going forward from here, where a lot of people would attempt to emulate and do it in its own way.
I'll stick my tongue up your pretty pussy.
You fucking creep!
I'm going to kill you.
And what's really fascinating is the fact that this predates Halloween by 4 years, making it the original holiday slasher, which is really crazy to think about, and predates Texas Chainsaw Massacre by a little bit over or under a year, depending on what release date you go off of. But it's just fascinating to see. This is really where it started, and the really cool thing about it is this is actually a solid film. Like, everything about this film is really good. The acting, the cinematography, the dialogue, everything just makes this actually a good film that's a horror film. And I can't deny the fact that I really actually enjoy this, despite the fact that it could seem a little dated.
Well, she's out for Christmas holidays, but there was a band practice over at the high school this afternoon, and Janice plays the clarinet.
If you recall from my 1974 horror movie review over the Halloween season, The Clown Murders, acting in the 1970s was kind of like melodramatic. Like, it wasn't very like huge in terms of like the range people had. It was a lot of quiet, reserved affairs. Nothing was too over the top. It was almost like a deadpan style. And what's funny is this actually works very well for the film. It just captures the period perfect vibes of everything. And it just makes it seem like when everything is happening, it's happening real organically. Because I guess when you think about it, no one's really like freaking out heavily when something like this happens. When someone gets a phone call from a sorority from a pervert, I guess no one's like freaking out and calling the police and going crazy. And the police are the type to just brush that type of stuff off, even to this day, because it's just stuff that happens. You know, perverts exist. But the whole affair of the deadpan melodramatic acting combined with the actual good acting and dialogue really makes this film come across wonderfully.
Don't you ever consider anyone but yourself?
I've thought this out very carefully, and I know what I'm going to do.
Do you know how important this afternoon is to me?
So this whole deadpan style of acting really makes it seem like impressive when that boyfriend goes off the hinges because the girlfriend doesn't want to keep the baby or have a baby. It's kind of wild the way they make it so that way all of a sudden these emotions are so explosive due to the deadpan style of acting. But what's really cool is we see what might very well be one of the very first like point of view killer camera angles where the killer isn't just killing someone, he's just going off the hinges and rails and smashing around and breaking things and destroying things because he's just fucking nuts. It reminds me of like the Boston Strangler around that time. And the whole fact that when he calls up this sorority house and he calls up with the heavy breathing and the over-the-top schematics when he's talking and really sounds like a menace on the other end of the phone, it all sounds extra raunchy and extra threatening and extra real because everyone else around it, again, has just got this deadpan style of acting where they're calm and mellow but still worried and concerned on their faces. It's just a weird style of acting from the time, and it really works well with the film, as you've heard me say. And as far as the gore goes in this, it's actually surprisingly alright kind of gory. Nowhere near the Texas Chainsaw Massacre that would come after it. We got a really cool kill scene with a strangulation via a plastic bag, which I thought was really unique and probably very scary for the time and really unnerving to audiences, which I know this film was to a lot of audiences at the time. We see a really cool kill in the attic involving that hook that's really brutal to imagine it happening because it probably must be really painful to be hit with a hook, which again was before the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was putting people on hooks. Crazy thoughts. And again, the ending to the whole thing kind of has this cliffhanger-esque vibe of did they catch him or is he still there? I'm a big fan of this film. It's one you definitely need to check out if you haven't, and I can't wait to watch the remakes and see if those are halfway decent and review them in future iterations of this show. Now here's a really crazy story about this film. This film was actually set to make its network debut under the title Stranger in the House on NBC's Saturday Night at the Movies, January 28, 1978. However, unfortunately, there was actually a murder at the Chi Omega sorority house in Tallahassee at the University of Florida, where 2 sorority girls were bludgeoned to death, unfortunately. From there, the attacker went on to actually go on and attack and injure 2 other individuals who got away. Ultimately, this individual that was the attacker became known as Ted Bundy. Yes, that's really crazy. So what happened from there is the president of NBC at the time offered the following states, Alabama, Florida, and I believe it was Georgia, the ability to play something else known as Doc Savage, the Man of Bronze, instead of this film due to the eerie similarities of the tragedy that had just taken place. And it's kind of crazy to think a film that was based on this happened to be something that happened later on in life. That's really crazy. During its initial release, the film garnered a lot of mixed reviews, which is rather fascinating because, again, it was the first of its kind at the time, so it was kind of bold and brave. But Variety was quoted as saying, "A whodunit of raises the question of why the film was even made." Gene Siskel actually gave it 1.5 out of 4 stars, basically labeling what happens when good actresses have to take bad roles and do their best with it to make it happen. The Los Angeles Times was actually quoted as saying, "Before it maddeningly overreaches in a gratuitous and an evasive ending, Black Christmas is actually a great, smart, and stylish film. It just seems that the creators didn't know how to end it because it was such a good film." And the ending in this film is, of course, the great debate of a lot of people who seem to like it and not. Ironically enough, this actually has a 71 and 76% on the tomato meter and audience score of Rotten Tomatoes, because it is a horror classic, and even though its melodramatic acting in the 70s is a little hard to follow, it's great to know that people still value this thing. And of course, this film had a remake, one in 2006, one in 2019, and I'll be taking a look at both in the future. But again, guys, that's fun facts about Black Christmas. You know, this is really like the iconic of iconic slasher films. This is the one that even beat Halloween to the punch as being the first holiday slasher. That's right, it actually beat Halloween to the punch as the first holiday slasher. And it's one of those films that really, you see the setting of the standards of the tropes in this. It's a lot of stuff that, even though it has that 70s melodramatic acting, it's a really good film, and it has its own place in time versus the whole 80s over-the-top style of acting. But all of the tropes are there that we soon see. Hormones, teenage women, parental adult figures, killer coming after everybody who's committing anything that is involving with premarital sex, drinking, sex, anything like that. We see the beginning of a lot of tropes here, and that's what really makes things so awesome. And what we really see the beginning of the trope of that blows me away is that, as someone who grew up in the 90s and saw this parodied so many times but had no idea what it was from, is the call is coming from inside the house. Yes, the call is coming from inside the house. The plotline twist, for those of you that haven't seen this before, that's something that actually came from this movie, and I must have seen that spoofed I don't know how many times, both in real horror movies trying to pay homage, and of course in the countless cartoons and other parodies, live action or not, that I saw growing up involved with this. I'm just blown away. This is what it is. And again, it's one of those things that the audience wasn't really ready for it yet at the time, and if you want my opinion as to why, it's unlike the Texas Chainsaw Massacre that came out not too long after this, like literally the next year, and absolutely lit the box office on fire. We never really get a chance to put a person to this. It's all point of view stuff. We never see who this Billy character is, despite the fact he's very interesting and very well drawn out, as you heard me say in the review, with all of the manic episodes and whatnot. We never really see who he is, so we never get a chance to really enjoy what he looks like, and I feel like that's what really made audiences not ready for the huge shift in the genre until it came out with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which again is more like half slasher film, half extreme art house film that's more slasher than art house. But this is something I just think needed that, and that's really my opinion on that. I'm just talking out loud. What I want to know is, have you seen this film? And let me know what you think of it. And more importantly, why do you think this film didn't do so great at the box office as the next slashers that came out afterwards? Because this is the slasher that really started a lot of things. And again, no iconic slasher to give us is why probably after the fact, we had a lot of Jasons, Freddys, and everything. People wanted something with personality. But again, guys, thanks for watching. Make sure and like and subscribe to the channel, and stick around all month long for more happy horror days, movie reviews about horror movies that take place on or around Christmas. And don't forget, every Thursday night, 9 p.m., twitch.tv/ILLTV4K, and right here on my YouTube channel, you can catch me for the scariest night in video game streaming, the Total Terror-Thon Thursday, and then Saturday nights, 10:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, catch me for the other scariest night in video game streaming, late night style, the Saturday Night Spooktacular. And again, guys, don't forget, you're watching ILL TV, where if it's pop culture, you know it pops up here.
You're watching ILL TV, where if it's pop culture, you know it pops up here.